Welcome back to 20 Minutes of Clarity, your go to podcast for financial information so you can make better informed financial decisions. I'm your host, Jason Noble, and with me today is Andy, the man merchant. Today, we're going to be answering this very important question. How does my relationship with money impact my financial decisions? Now, we're gonna break this down into three different main topics to answer and address this question. One is going to be around your money mindset. The second is going to be around your emotions around financial decisions. And the one I find the most intriguing, Andy, is really around in aligning your financial decisions around your values. So we want you to like, subscribe, and follow. Also, go to clearpicturefinancial.com so you could listen to other podcasts and also download our transcript and our white paper from this conversation. So, Andy, I always like to bring you in at this point. I mean, when we go into these three things, it's so interesting. Like when we were preparing for this conversation, when we were just talking, you were talking about money mindset and the fact that like that's going to be the top of the list. I really want you to kick that off. So, what do you mean by money mindset?
Well, Jason, when we talk to clients all the time, money mindset, I think is really the foundation that we're trying to get our clients to, sit back and reflect a little bit on because we all come into a relationship with some kind of past experience with money or some future concern. And a lot of it's based on the lifestyles that we grew up in. I mean, if you grew up in a household where abundance was kind of, the mindset or entrepreneurship was the mindset, you're going to have one approach to advice and how you receive the advice we give or the planning that you try to implement compared to a scarcity mindset. So it's really down to mindset is, are you an abundant thinker and approach thing with abundancy? Or are you someone that's going to, you know, kind of shell up a little bit, approach it a little bit more with scarcity? So that's the biggest hurdle that we usually come across with clients is talking about that. And that's really what I really want us to hit on today is understanding who you are in those two categories.
When we have our core values meeting through the clear picture process, in there, I really want to know the client's like money story. I want to understand like how they were raised and like their relationship with money up until this point. That gives me an idea if we have to start breaking down some the what they call the psychology of money, right? Do we have some headwinds or walls that are put up that we need to start addressing, right? But in that, it's very interesting. It's like how we were raised to our social environment can have a big impact on how we actually look at finances. So it's understanding their money story is really what I'm looking at accomplishing in that core values meeting. And I always found it very interesting when I'm working with someone who has a positive money mindset, how that really leads to healthier financial decisions. While I've seen at the same time, someone that has a negative belief may result in even self-sabotaging their behaviors. It's like they keep on getting in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
An example of like self-sabotaging is when I see someone has a ton of money in cash. They were raised in an environment of scarcity, right? So they have this cash and it's sitting off in the bank. And I was working with this particular couple where they had half of their investable assets in cash. Neither one of them has ever invested in a stock in their entire life, and they're in their mid to late 50s at the time of this conversation. And the only other investment experience that they've ever had was buying bonds, right? Now, taking a look at the bond market, taking a look at what's going on with cash at the time, it was really important that we did get some equity exposure into the portfolio to offset inflationary risk and for having that long-term growth, right? And they understood it. I showed them the information, I showed them the data. But then it was going like, okay, every single time we met, and they only asked me what the returns were on the stocks. And then they would see that they had a positive return, but then that's just paper return. It's not realized. Okay, if you want me to sell on a monthly basis to realize it, I can,
Yep. Yep.
right? Is that what you want me to do? and so every single meeting that we're still having 2 years later after they hired us is having that conversation over how their psychology of money and helping them break down that scarcity mindset so they can start moving to that growth or abundant mindset,
Yeah.
right? And I know you and I've had this conversation in prior podcasts, right? So not only can people listen to what we're saying now, but they can also look at the prior podcasts and look at that white paper as well, talking about a similar concept, which is about that money mindset. Do you have any examples that you like to share, Andy, over the
Yeah.
mindset like that of like someone that you came across?
Well, no, it's more of us expanding, Jason. If you look at why we built the Clear Picture Wealth program, we did was really around how to simplify the complex relationship people have with money. Too many of the clients, and I mean, I could probably go and think of countless clients that we both work with, that I'm working with, that a lot of times there's a scarcity mindset, maybe on the short term goals. There's market volatility, there's spending needs, there's uncertainty. So I think people tend to be more of a scarcity mindset around short-term goals. And they need to be more abundant in the long term. We all think that, oh man, I'm going to retire in 30 years. We stash away money in a 401k. Most people out there listening or viewing this today are probably not sitting there as concerned with their 401k unless they're nearing retirement. So it's really about not so much sharing a story, it's about sharing a message right now around mindset. And what I'm encouraging everyone that's listening and viewing today is that you need to sit down and start to reprogram your mindset, because the great advice that Jason and I can give you, or the rest of our team, or even the things that you can learn across the way, whether it's reading books or checking out other podcasts, reading the white papers, if your mindset is to approach it with scarcity, you're going to come into it with, maybe a little bit more hesitation, maybe a little bit more resistance. And if you come into it with an open minded, like, I believe that this financial advice is going to help me on my long term future, I think you're going to approach things and see things in a whole different light. So the message really, as we jump into emotion, because I know that drives a lot of this, is really about how do you start to be intentional about shifting from a scarcity to an abundance. And if you're already in abundance, is how are you able to continue to optimize that abundant mindset in making really good informed decisions?
Well, then I want to transition into emotions, and I have seen how emotions could really start coming into play when making financial decisions. Let's transition to emotions now,
Yeah.
Andy. What would you want to touch on when it comes to addressing how emotions comes into making financial decisions?
Yeah, well, our industry has made it to where, money is this super emotional thing. Nobody wants to lose it. I've never had one client ever walk into my office and say, "Hey, tell me about all the times that you've lost money for clients and how you reacted to that." Because that goes back to what you mentioned earlier. It's how it's realized or not realized. Markets are a movement, right? But we are deeply tied to the money that we have, and that's why I think that it's important, kind of going back to some of the early things we just talked about, is you need to categorize your money and understand the buckets of those, right? If you cash should be more emotional because you need that for tomorrow. That's why we talk all the time about emergency funds. Long-term retirement accounts should have a very different mindset in emotional triggers that go into that. You should be able to sustain loss. Now, how I'm going to wrap a bow on this, because I know we got some ideas on your thoughts around about emotion that we'll continue to talk, is in our world, and we talked in this podcast a lot about how our industry has helped or has impacted people or influenced them. We ask clients to fill out a risk profile that bases their current feelings about their overall money, given the current situation. So if the markets are down, Jason, do you really think that the clients and the viewers that we have out there are going to sit there and say, "Man, I'm super excited about the market," unless they're have the right mindset, right? And so the reality is that our industry has kind of set clients up to trigger more emotion, because we are what we are. We've grown up in a sales focused industry, and that's the big shift. It's why I'm glad so many people are listening and viewing to this. It's to see the fact that how do we reduce emotion? Is we educate you, we provide you with a clear path, and then hopefully that those things are going to go through it. But just understanding it and bucketing it out, I think, is so important in this part of the message.
Yeah, and what I would say is when I have someone reaching out that wants to make an investment decision based off of emotions, what I want them to, I actually take them through this process. It's just, I want them to pause before acting. right? Take a moment and assess their emotional state. Like, are you making this decision logically or emotionally? I'm asking that question here on this podcast. I do it way more smoother
Yeah.
when they're in the midst of it, right? It's more of questions. Hey, what brought you to making this decision, or what do you need to see to make another decision on this, right? And I'm asking them a series of questions, and I could pick up, was this came did they come to this conclusion logically or emotionally?
Mhm.
Usually, because if it's emotional, by the time I get to my second or third question, even like, they start to really have to think through their answers. It's like they have this pausing effect. I also go, okay, let me show you a visualization. If we do what you want us to do, here's the impact to your overall financial plan. And they can see if it's green to improve their plan, or if it's gray, that will show that it hurts their plan. And they see that it's gray. I'm like, okay, are you okay with making this decision that could cost you this much?
Mhm.
With all things being equal, the only variable that we're changing is this decision. Are you okay with this? This is not a decision that's only going to be for here and now. It's going to have a lasting impact. Are you aware of those ramifications? And I like to give them the visualization. And then it's just also going like, okay, because we've had this conversation, I want you to think about it over the next week. Let's talk. 1 week's not going to move the needle one way or the other. Let's talk about it in a week from now.
Mhm.
And usually, not all the time, but the majority of the time, they ended up deciding not to take that action that they were looking at taking with emotions. Why is that? Other things came in their life that created more emotions, right? Right?
Mhm.
And they decided it was not as relevant or important to act on that knee-jerk reaction, that emotional reaction, because they had more time on their side. The other thing that I think that we do within the clear picture is the PPPs. How much do we have in public market exposure, protected, and then private? What I see that coming into plan into play is within the financial plan, it provides us guardrails. It allows us to set boundaries. We do that within how we're doing the actual investment strategy, but we also do that with how we're focusing on cash flow optimization, right? We're also looking at how do we put those numbers in place and prioritize so people can make better informed decisions. And then every single year, they're getting a new score based off of the actions that they took. And they're seeing you sticking to the plan, you're not having knee jerk reactions over the course of the year, allows you to improve your scores over time. So I look at that scorecard that we provide as a prioritization, but also as a way to measure how they're doing tracking towards their own personal financial goals to hit their financial freedom,
Yeah.
right?
And that's so well said, Jason, that I think we need to re-say it because the industry is very limited on a scoring system to help clients and people understand the whys and the hows and the what happened, right? So it's so important to highlight that part of the Clear Picture Wealth program was designed to provide clients with a scoring element because we truly believe that how you reduce fear of something, if it that side of the emotion, or how we take advantage or have a conversation around greed, the other side of the emotion, is by having a clear understanding as to the why. And I think that's missed in a lot of financial plans because they're detailed, they're full of information that, quite honestly, gets you and I and the rest of our team really excited. Like I love the graphs, I love the 144 pages. I'm sure you've got some interest, but that's not the everyday world that the client wants to see. They don't want a 145-page financial plan that says, "Hey, you're going to achieve your lifestyle goal at this point." They want to know if you're telling me to do something, how do I have less fear towards it? Is I understand why. If you're telling me that I need to sell something and reduce my stock position because things have gone so well, we don't want you to get greedy, right? Now we understand the why, and so we really think that I think that's a huge matter. I know I rambled on because I take on that time, but it's so important that you highlighted the fact that we have this proprietary scoring algorithm and system that really solves how we help our clients make that decision and simplify that complexity that they have.
You weren't rambling on. You were sharing your passion on the topic. And Ramble On by Led Zeppelin is a phenomenal song. But anyway, let's get into
Yeah.
aligning your financial decisions with your values.
Yep.
We left this one for the end because I really believe this really puts a really good bow on this conversation. You have your why if you aligned your decisions with your values. Your values are not going to have that emotional knee jerk reaction, right? That's something else that's coming into play. And that's fear or maybe greed that's coming in. Probably not the emotions that are in line with your values,
Mhm.
right? So, but if you have your values strong and you align your financial goals with your values, then the other things that we talked about just fall right in line. So we kept this for the end so that you had to wait to hear this message, right? But in the meantime, we want you to like, subscribe, or follow. Go to clearpicturefinancial.com to learn more. But let's talk about this now. It's so important of aligning your financial goals with your personal values that really creates that purpose within your money management. I believe people with a purpose are able to strive to do amazing things. But when you align your purpose with your money and assign purpose with your money, that's where it takes it to a whole nother level. I
Mhm.
know I've been rambling on now. I'm going to turn it to you, Andy, to talk more about aligning your values with your money.
Yeah, no, it's such an important part. I mean, we created an entire introductory client session just to this because we believe that understanding and identifying what those core values are the very first step that you have. Whether or not you want, it's really about prioritizing. I should so identify and prioritize those. Some may be out there saying, you know what, family security is my number one priority. If that's what it is, that's going to drive your investment decision and your wealth plan one direction, right? If being very generous in your community and giving back your time is one of those top three priorities, that's going to change how you invest stuff. If you're on the complete end of the under spectrum and you're like, you know what, I'm going to be a bachelor or a bachelorette my life of my life, maybe go on one of those shows at some point in time to at later. No, but if you want that adventure and how you approach things and you do everything just kind of random and off the cuff, that's going to drive how your financial future is. So I think the very first thing is that we ask our clients to do when they come into our initial conversation, that core value meeting, is to start by identifying them, talk a little bit through their story, because once you can understand that, then you can start to set the goals that are going to help you realize that desired outcome or those outcomes in the most efficient manner. So that's really where I start with it, Jason. Is it's really about having that in-depth conversation, and then listening and learning to those goals, and then we can start to get into the nitty-gritty of the financial planning elements.
Once we have their values, we have their goals, then we can optimize their cash flow. And I go back to that 50-30-20 rule, right? 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% towards savings or investments or paying down the debt, right? It's like, okay, how do we then integrate non-monetary goals like lifestyle objectives, work-life balance into the overall plan as well, right? Putting that into those different buckets for optimization of cash flow. And like if they have the couple I'm working with, if they have this goal where they do want to save for their retirement, but also for their children's education, but they also want to live life now, right?
Mhm.
They don't want to put all this money away and not have these experiences with their children. It's like, what does that look like? Right? Are you looking at traveling domestically? Are you looking at traveling internationally? What does that look like from a budget perspective, from a cost perspective? How often do you want to do this? Do you want to take two domestic trips a year, one international? What I mean, what how big or small does this look like for you particularly? Right? And when I'm thinking about like the gifts that I gave during the Christmas season this past year, right? It was like, what are the gifts that are going to create that experience and those memories that I find to be more and more important as I get older, right? When
Mhm.
I was maybe I would want more tangible gifts when I was younger, but now as being older and a little bit more gray on my beard, Andy, I do want to have more of those experiences. It aligns within my values, right? And I also encourage clients to use milestones to stay motivated, right? Um, when
Well,
they see they hit certain milestones that they created, I don't give them milestones. I'm like, hey, what are some milestones do you want to make sure you achieve? I make sure I take note of that. So when they achieve that milestone, they're getting a phone call
yep.
before they even realize it themselves. Hey, congratulations, you achieved this milestone that you shared with me 4 years ago or 2 years ago, whatever the time frame may have been. You know how great that is to make that phone call,
Yeah.
but how great it is to receive that phone call, right? And it's going like, congratulations. I want you to think about your next milestone before our next meeting,
Yeah.
right? And share it. And
It's that financial intentionality, right? I mean,
mm,
and it's on both sides. We talked in our last week's podcast was, do you need a financial advisor or can you do it yourself, right? We've created the Clear Picture training program that helps the client understand whether they can do it. And it starts with that core value. If financial freedom is one of your core values that you in goals that you want to obtain or why it's there, if you don't have that dollar amount and that date, that milestone to achieve that, it's really hard to stay focused and stay intentional, right? And then if you want to do it yourself, do you have that accountability partner to kind of help keep nudging you along the way? That's why this is a relationship with money. This isn't money in the market. This isn't just my investment return and review at the end of the year. This isn't a bunch of financial jargon on a single page or 145 pages. This is a very intentional relationship that everybody has with their money, and the decisions that go into it are oftentimes not reversible, right? And so by having that accountability partner that understands your values, that helps you align and identify the goals that you have based on those milestones you put, I mean, that's where I think people then kind of start looking at going, I love financial. That's why I picked this industry. It is so fun to watch clients achieve an outcome when they didn't know that that outcome was achievable.
and you said it best. I mean, there's nothing else to say at this topic at this point because you wrapped a wonderful bow on this topic. We talked about how your financial mindset and could really impact your financial decisions. This is where you go to clearpicturefinancial.com to learn more. Reach out if you want us to help you within your roadmap and help you achieve your financial freedom. I'm Jason Noble. That was Andy the Man Merchant. Now you know why we call him the Man Merchant. Tune in to 20 Minutes of Clarity next time. Thank you so much.